Back to wrap up hour number one here of the program. Appreciate you being here on this Wednesday. Make sure you download the KDUS AM 1060 app so you can take us with you on the go. We've got ASU women's basketball later on today. Their first round matchup in the Big 12 women's basketball tournament. I believe pregame is at 4 with tip at 4:30. You can hear that right here on KDUS AM 1060. The Associated Press obtained the numbers of the payroll figures for all of the teams in Major League Baseball, and to the surprise of absolutely nobody, the New York Mets led the way in 2024, the third straight season that they topped this mark, $333.3 million regular payroll record. They had $430.4 million in payroll plus luxury tax. The year before that, it was $420 million, and they have done so for three straight seasons. Since Steve Cohen has taken over for the New York Mets in 4 years, they have paid $1.36 billion in payroll and luxury tax over the 4 seasons. That is more than what the Marlins, Pirates, and Rays each have spent on players in the past 21 seasons combined. So the Marlins' last 21 seasons, short of that $1.36 billion number for Steve Cohen since he took over in New York. Do you see why we're probably heading towards a lockout when the CBA comes up in 2 seasons? Do you see why we're heading towards a massive conversation about a salary cap and the financials of baseball? 3 teams, the Marlins, the Pirates, and the Rays, in 21 seasons. You add up every single one of their years, all 21 years of the Marlins' budgets, all 21 years of the Pirates' budgets. The Mets in 4 seasons have paid more in payroll and luxury tax than those 3 teams have done combined. $1.36 billion in payroll and luxury tax. Now, the key part of this, and I'm going to pay off the tease that I had before we started this segment. Last year, the Diamondbacks did something that no other team beat them at. Not the Dodgers, not the Yankees, not the Mets. The Arizona Diamondbacks had the largest increase in payroll year over year. From 2023 to 2024, the Arizona Diamondbacks had the largest increase in payroll out of any team in Major League Baseball. The Dodgers increased their payroll from 2023 to 2024 by $29.5 million. The Yankees increased their payroll year over year $27.1 million. The New York Mets, we just told you, spent $333.3 million last year. They increased their payroll by $13.7. The Arizona Diamondbacks last year took their payroll from 2023, $128.9 million, and increased it all the way to $177.1 million, an increase of $48.2 million. Nobody had a higher mark. The Cubs were second at $34.2. So now, you look at this year, they're at 177.1 for last year. They're up to around 193, 195. That's nearly an increase of $18 million. That would have been good enough to put them in the upper echelon as well. The only teams that spent more than $18 million difference between 23 and 24 was Washington, Kansas City, Baltimore, the Yankees, Dodgers, Braves, Astros, Cubs, Diamondbacks. 9. So they would have been in the top 10 again. They'll be in the top 10 again if you just take their number from last year to this year and apply it to what we've seen over these 2 years. And so they spent more money than everybody else. My takeaway here, this is why it is so important for this team to succeed. Because I think everybody has enjoyed the Diamondbacks being major players in free agency. I think they've enjoyed the Diamondbacks being able to add players like the caliber of Corbin Burns in free agency. Like being able to add a Jordan Montgomery or an Eduardo Rodriguez in free agency when those scenarios pop up. Signing a Jock Peterson, being able to trade for a Josh Naylor and take on that salary. I think we all enjoy the Diamondbacks being major players. And outside of the Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, they're really the other big fish. And they're not at that level, right? Their payroll this year, under $200 million. 10 teams last year topped $200 million in total. Diamondbacks aren't in that club. So it's not like they're spending wildly, but for them, they're spending more than they ever had in the past. It is why they need to succeed. Their TV deal's up in the air. They are going to take a loss on this season. They're just spending more than they bring in. They're spending more than they bring in, and they're doing so in an effort to try to win so they can recoup it on the back end. So that if they have success this year with that $190+ million payroll, that it will lead to increased ticket sales, that it will lead to a better TV deal when that situation resolves itself, merch deals, all of that sponsorship type stuff, to where they can recoup that back over the course of time and then continue to reinvest into the product. The playoff gates are important. That playoff share of the TV deal is important. That's the reason why they were able to go from $128 million to nearly $180, why they were able to have an increase of $48.2 million. All that TV money that came in over the playoffs, their playoff gates, the millions of dollars that was, I don't want to call it free money, but it's basically free money. When you put your budget together for the year, you don't calculate any playoff gates, any playoff revenue, playoff TV deals. You got to be more on the conservative side. Then you get all that extra money, and then you can completely reinvest it into the team. And I don't want this team to have had the resources put behind them by Ken Kendrick over the last couple of years and it be for nothing. I want to see them continue to live in this range. If they live in this range, 170, 180, 190 million dollars, they're going to be able to be a major player for some free agents. If they structure contracts correctly, if they get extensions done like they did with Geraldo Perdomo, if they get those done early, it frees up that additional money for them. That's why there's pressure on this team to succeed this year. That's why there's pressure for them to bounce back from last season. Because if you have a couple of years in a row where you don't make the playoffs, and if they didn't make the playoffs this year, it would be 2 in a row, those numbers just have to come down. They will come down. And then you'll start to see them be more in line with 2023. And you know what that means if they have to bring those numbers down? That means trading players that you love. That means finding salaries that you can move on from and try to recoup assets in a different way. But last year, the Diamondbacks did something that no other team in baseball could beat them at. They increased their payroll, they increased their budget by more than any other team in baseball. Now, mind you, they're still not one of the top spending teams, right? They're not one of the 10 teams that spent over $200 million. Cubs spent over $200 million last year. Houston, Atlanta, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Giants, Toronto, Philly, Texas. Those are your teams that spent over $200 million. They made a big increase. Now, they're not San Diego, who shed $85 million from their 2023 budget. They're not the Angels, who shed $51.5 million. The Twins, $34 million. They're not at the complete other end of the spectrum here. They are right there, smack in the middle of the road, doing what you want to see a team do when their window starts to open. Support that window with dollars. Support that window with resources to try to add via free agency. You just have to hope that this team is able to put together a product on the field and have results that allow them to keep living somewhat in this tax bracket, living somewhat in this neighborhood, being able to spend around this, because there's a big difference between having a payroll of $128.9 million and having a payroll of $177.1. That nearly $50 million difference, that's a couple of impact players. That's 1 or 2 big-time players. It might be 3 or 4 mid-tier players or just average players that round out the edges of your roster. There's a difference between that. And so if the results follow, they might be able to continue to stay in that range. That is going to give Mike Hazen the resources, the dollars, the investment that he needs to continue to have a winner here. Now, I'm excited for baseball season. I've told you many times over what I think of this team and what I think they can do. I think 90-plus wins are on the table. I think having a summer where this team has 2 Cy Young candidates is on the table. I think a summer where every series with the Dodgers is must-see baseball and feels like a playoff atmosphere is on the table. I think Corbin Carroll being an MVP candidate, Ketel Marte remaining in the MVP conversation is on the table. I think all of that is available to this team. And so if those results come, imagine when the trade deadline rolls around. They might want to buy. They might want to take a big swing and add some talent, add that elite reliever, trade for somebody, an additional bat for their lineup if that's what they think the missing piece is. And that would make for a very exciting summer here. They just barely missed last year. And you know what? That would have been all the reason. You added $48 million to the budget, $48 million to the payroll, and you missed the playoffs. You took a step backwards. That would have been an easy excuse to revert back to somewhat in line with 2023 numbers. But instead, Ken Kendrick doubled down. And it's the best kind of double down. It's a double down that reinforced his belief in this team. And I think that belief is going to pay off. I think that belief is going to pay off in a way where we see this team competing in a big way in the National League. The National League's tough. You got your own division with the Dodgers, with the Padres, with the Giants. That's going to be tough. But then you've got the Phillies, you've got the Mets, you've got the Braves, you've got the Brewers, you've got the Cubs, the Reds, all of these teams that are actively trying to win. That is a very, very tough hill to climb. And I think this team can do it. And you're seeing the investment from the team behind it. So I saw this today as the AP got these numbers, and I thought it was interesting. One, the top line of who spent the most and how one owner is spending more in 4 years than teams have done in the last 2 decades. That's not good for the health of baseball. But more importantly, the top line takeaway on a lot of these stories is the Diamondbacks had the biggest growth in budget, more than anybody else. It's the reason why people have been talking about them as a sleeping giant in all of baseball.